Redistricting advocates are hoping for more public meetings after lawmakers wrapped up a series of 9 hearings to collect feedback on the process. But as Mitch Legan reports, Republican lawmakers plan on going ahead and drawing maps with the new census data released this week.
Redistricting reform advocates rallied outside the Statehouse Wednesday with a clear message for lawmakers: draw competitive legislative maps in an open, transparent way.
And there are far more people today than there were 10 years ago who understand how toxic it is for our democracy.
The rally took place before the state's last meeting to solicit feedback on redistricting. But the necessary data for redistricting weren't released until Thursday, the day after the final meeting, and maps aren't expected until September.
That's like asking someone to solve a jigsaw puzzle and using the wrong pieces. It's not transparent, and it doesn't allow for the public to give true input.
Those attending the hearings over the last week were working off maps from a decade ago. They argue the public should have at least a couple weeks to review the proposed maps after they're unveiled sometime next month.
Without giving the public the ability to provide input on the Republican redistricting proposal, the meetings held this past week and today were nothing more than simply window dressing.
Republicans were in control when the state completed redistricting back in 2011. By 2012, they secured a supermajority in both the House and Senate that's only continued to grow. Reform advocates say partisan gerrymandering has helped the GOP gain more seats in the legislature than merited by its vote totals across the state.
No cracking! No packing!
But Indiana Republicans don't plan on holding any more hearings, since the pandemic has already delayed the redistricting process. They say county clerks across the state need to know what the new district maps look like as soon as possible to prepare for next year's elections. But Democrats such as Bloomington Representative Matt Pierce aren't buying it.
You can have at least a couple weeks of more hearings on the actual proposed maps, and I think get things done in time for the local election officials to do what they need to do.
There will likely be 2 more hearings at the Statehouse once the maps are unveiled next month, one in the House and one in the Senate. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Mitch Legan.
My colleague Brandon Smith, who covers the Statehouse, was at this week's meeting. Brandon joins us now from Indianapolis. So Brandon, let's just recap a bit what's been happening in the past couple of weeks. Lawmakers have held several meetings, including the one this week at the Statehouse. What were those meetings like, since there weren't any maps yet that people could provide feedback on?
Yeah, well, we heard that very subject come up at these meetings, which is people saying, hey, these meetings are nice, but you need to have another round of meetings once we have actual maps to look at. But what we did hear besides that at these meetings was what people want out of the maps very broadly, the sort of criteria they want lawmakers to use to keep communities of interest together. So trying not to split neighborhoods or cities or counties whenever possible, that sort of thing. And they also talked about their frustrations with the maps that were drawn a decade ago and what they'd like to see differently this time.
You know, we know the delayed census data has complicated the process. Remind me what this looked like about 10 years ago. Did lawmakers draw maps and then invite the public to comment?
Yeah, it was actually not that dissimilar from what we're seeing this time. What was different was the timeline. 10 years ago, the lawmakers drew new maps in the middle of their normal legislative session, so they were drawn in April. And what we saw was, once lawmakers drew the maps, there was only a day or two between when the maps were unveiled and when the public could comment in a committee hearing at the legislature, and then the maps were approved by a committee and then moving through the normal bill creating process. So timeline very different, but the actual process so far is somewhat similar.
We just have about 30 seconds left. Can you explain kind of what happens next?
Sure, lawmakers will come back in mid to late September and have that normal legislative process just for the bills on redistricting themselves. So they'll unveil the maps, pass that legislation, and then it'll go to the governor.
All right, Brandon, thank you very much. Appreciate it.